and then when you collect those signatures under the initiative, this law will come up on the ballot. If the people vote yes, it passes. If the people vote no, then it doesn't. The trick with an initiative is that it has nothing to do with the legislature or the governor, anything to do with any of the state government. This is just the people that introduce it, they collect the signatures, and then they vote on it. And even if the elected branches don't like it, it still becomes law. Anybody with any other questions from the terms up here? Go ahead, Blake.
Was it who?
Who? Who is talking about the Declaration of Independence? So you've got, if you remember, who wrote it? Who was it written about? Who was it written for? Who wrote it? Jefferson. Jefferson was the one that was dealing with the Declaration of Independence. Who was it written about?
The king
of
England.
The King of England. Yes, it was written about the king. Who was it written for?
Everyone. Allies.
Everyone and allies.
Yeah.
What does that mean? It was written for allies. What was the Declaration of Independence?
Separation. They wanted separation from England.
They wanted separation from England, so they just said, we hate you, England, we want to separate.
Because they kept on creating all these different taxes and stuff like that.
Yeah, but what was the Declaration? Because there was something real specific that we said it was in class. The Declaration was a legal justification for separation from England. And that's the thing, you're right, England tried to impose some taxes, and we talked about some of the things that they taxed, but the bottom line, it was a legal justification. It was written by Jefferson. It was written about the king. It was a legal justification for separation from England, and then ultimately it was written for potential allies, and mercifully France came through. Yes?
Didn't we also say it was a declaration of war against the king?
Yeah, you can make that argument as well, absolutely, because the king wasn't going to take it very kindly. Legal separation is probably the best way of saying it, but effectively it was a declaration of war. Go ahead.
So basically, what you want us to know for who is Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence for the king, allies, separation by legal justification, and France helped.
Yeah.
So how did France help? I don't remember.
France was the ally that eventually accepted our plea. They accepted the legal argument, and they became our ally to fight England. Yeah, that's what that was. Anybody with any other questions from chapter 1?
What do you want us to know about political science?
Political science, politics, and politicians are basically just straight definitions. If you want to cross off political science, that's fine. Got no gripes with that. Do you remember what politics was? Because we had a series of articles that dealt with politics. What was politics?
We choose officials. Yeah.
Okay, we choose officials.
And make decisions about public. We choose government officials that choose policies that we support.
Okay, go ahead, Richardson. The camera's on you, Richardson, no pressure.
Oh, okay. I was thinking like the output or the result, what we get from the government.
Yes, it is. It's the output. So we're talking about the people that get elected into office from the elections, or we're talking about the laws that get passed from the legislature. So that's what politics is. It's going to be those outputs. So when you think about it, I had given you the example in class of the idea of a flower needing dirt to grow.
Yes.
Politics is the dirt that leads to those outputs. Politicians, pretty much straightforward. The actors who are going to be in the government. Anybody else with anything from chapter 1? Go ahead.
By order, do you mean what we give up for order, or?
Well, okay, freedom, order, and equality all went together. If you remember, freedom, order, and equality all went together. So what was freedom?
Right to do what you feel like. I don't know.
The right to do what you feel. Well, see, that leaves open a lot of interpretations here.
Bill of Rights.
Okay, so political freedom could be part of this. What else? Anybody? Well, yeah, religion, that would probably fall under political, First Amendment freedom. But what other kinds of freedoms do you have?
Personal.
Personal. What are some examples of personal choices, Mark?
Like the right to say whatever you want.
Okay, that's still a political one, but what other personal choices? Because you're right, that's a big part of it.
You get to, you're
who
not
you wanna
forced to
date
do
or-
anything. You have the option to do, like, make your own choices.
That's true, but give me some specifics, like who you want to date, or if you want to marry, or if you want to pursue an education. When you take the exam, be specific when you write those short answers, because if it looks like you're BSing me, I get grumpy. It really does. If you've got specific things, that always helps. when you think back to freedom, it was political freedom. It was personal freedom. It was educational. It was the ability to go out and pursue a spouse if that's what you wanted to do, or have kids. So there were a lot of ways: professional, political, personal, these types of things. What was order? What was the one word that was basically order?
It's basically law. Like,
Law.
Law throughout the land. Basically, like there has to be order in order for freedom and equality to survive.
Okay, if there's too much freedom, then nobody has freedom. So you need order, you need limits. Go ahead, Blake.
Was it safety and security?
Yeah, it was. Order, another word for order was people, some people want to feel safe. Some people want to feel secure. So when you think about it, freedom is going to be dealing with the things that we can do. Order is going to be dealing with protections. Maybe protections from ourselves, maybe protections from outside enemies, these kinds of things. And then what was equality?
Same.
Equal.
Everybody is going to be treated equal by the law, absolutely. Now let's jump into articles from chapter 1. And I'll go ahead and hit on some of these. And you'll get a sense here fairly quick. Catholic school teacher. What was the Catholic school teacher article?
She got fired. She got pregnant. And she didn't marry the husband.
Okay, the Catholic school teacher got fired because she got pregnant out of wedlock. Why officially did she get fired?
Because she
Because
didn't
you
marry
can
the
tell
guy.
she's pregnant. Where for a guy, you can't tell he's pregnant.
What did the contract say?
She has to follow the rules of Catholic.
Yeah, basically she had to uphold the teachings of the Catholic faith. And getting pregnant outside of wedlock meant that she was not upholding the Catholic faith, which ultimately meant, Nicole, that she wasn't upholding the Catholic faith, which ultimately means that she was breaching her contract. That's technically why she was fired. What were some of the arguments as far as whether she should get her job back or whether she should be fired?
You couldn't test that. I mean, you couldn't test if men had prenatal sex.
Okay, so if Aaron got a woman pregnant, would we know?
No.
Why not?
There's no physical difference.
The woman is going to show. Aaron, unless there's something I don't know, is not going to show for something like this. So when you think about it, there's what is that? If the woman can be fired for having sex out of wedlock and the man can't,
She claimed that it was discrimination.
it sounds sexist. It sounds like discrimination based on gender. So she was suing for equality reasons. Why should she be fired? She
violated the contract.
She breached her contract, and this would also be a religious issue for the church because this was a Catholic school, so they're going to want their religious freedom to be able to determine who works there. And if you're a parent that sent your kid to the Catholic school,
There's a yeah.
what do you want?
You want them to learn about the Catholic faith. You don't want
So do you want her staying there?
no.
You want her fired because what are you learning at the Catholic school?
You have to get married to do those.
Well, I don't know if you're learning that. I'm sorry. What I did I hear?
Just the Catholic morals, what they believe.
Morals, yeah. You're not just there for the reading and the writing and the math, but you're there for morals too. And if you've got somebody that's out of wedlock that's pregnant there, that's not exactly teaching Catholic morals. Not that I'm passing judgment. Confusing status was the one that was dealing with the eggs. Do you remember anything about the eggs article?
Yeah.
3 people. It was between 3 states. I think.
Yeah, there were 3 states that were involved, and there were 3 people that were involved.
Daniel.
Did you say Daniel?
No, the surrogate mother,
Yeah.
egg donor, and guy.
So you had a guy who was contracting with a woman to donate eggs that he could combine with his sample and then implant this into a third person who was going to be the surrogate mother. Who was the dispute between?
The surrogate versus the guy.
Surrogate versus the guy. So the egg donor didn't want any part of this. What was the problem for the surrogate mother?
He didn't come pick up the kids after 6 days.
Didn't?
Between 6
They
days.
kept moving around.
Yeah, okay, the surrogate mother basically made the argument that indeed he had not come to pick up the kids within 6 days to see them, name them, or anything. And the surrogate mother basically said what? What did this demonstrate? He didn't care, he wasn't going to be a good parent, so what did she do?
Kept them.
She kept them, she took them home. What, Blake, actually happened?
The guy, what she did actually?
Yeah, what did she, the surrogate mother?
She told the people that he was crazy or something like that, and he wasn't safe to be around the children, so she got the doctors to move the babies around every time he tried to come in.
The hospital actually helped the mother hide the kids, and then on the 6th day, finally she took them home at that point. What did he sue her for?
I forgot.
Custody, but what was that, Richard?
Violating her contract.
Yeah, basically he was suing her for breaching the contract because he had paid her X amount of dollars. He had provided her X amount of medical care in order for her to basically raise or birth, or if you will, bake the bread. Basically, she was supposed to deliver him these kids. She did not, and she ended up having, how many? She had 3. She had triplets on this. What did the court say when it finally got to court?
You have to, if you want to keep the kids, you have to pay all the money back to the guy.
Yeah. In this instance, and probably the best way of saying this is, when you think back to it, she probably got attached to the kids being inside of her for 9 months. Now, the interesting piece about this was they weren't her eggs, they weren't her sperm, so technically you could argue that they weren't her kids, even though they came out of her, and that was what a lot of people seemed to get mad about. Having said all this, he sued for breach of contract. The judge, as you said, if you give the money back, you can keep the kids. If you can't give the money